Hello, I'm very new to Reddit, and sorry if this is not written or formatted too well. I'm still trying to work things out. And sorry this is so long. I promise though that the last paragraphs are very scary. As a little background for this story, I'm 17, female, and Australian. I'm often the only one home in afternoons, so my father works away a lot and my mother works until late at night. Luckily, I have my lovely dog keeping me company. We rent out our house and it is very old and it shows. When we first moved in, my parents made a complaint to the realtors that the kitchen was falling apart, and they said they would send somebody over. A month later, it was about 2 p.m. and there was a knock on the door, and a man told me that he was here to take a look at the kitchen and that he had tried to call both my parents, but neither had answered. He looked to be in his 40s and seemed to have an Italian accent, but spoke English very well, so I understood him fine. I unlocked the screen and allowed him in while trying to cling to the dog's collar, as she was losing her cool. The handyman came in and told me his name, which I've since forgotten. He then asked for mine, I told him. Then he asked me what I was doing home so early, and I explained that sometimes my classes at school finished earlier than most, and so I was able to be at home. Something about him made my hair stand on end, but I ignored it, blaming it on just being tired and paranoid. He went and faucetted around the kitchen, measuring and doing the standard stuff, and then left. When my parents came home, I told them about him, and they said that neither of their phones had missed calls. We all shrugged it off and decided that maybe he had the wrong numbers or something, but I did tell my mom that he creeped me out, and she told me to be careful around him if they weren't home. A couple months later, more stuff broke, and my parents again told the real estate agent. The handyman came again twice when I was alone, and he had the same story of my parents not answering the phone, and I let him in since I had my dog and I wanted to get the stuff fixed. He still made my skin crawl, so I tended to go into my room with my dog and call my best friend and talk to her while he worked. He was scared of the dog, and on the third time he came to the house, he mustn't have realized that she was in my room with me and tried to force the door open. The doors in this house are original, and so they have strange locks that even I can force open if I want to, so he easily got it after a minute. My dog threw herself off my bed and at him, and I just grabbed her before she managed to bite. I was in shock because she had never really tried to hurt somebody, and some guy just forced to open my door. He told me that he had finished the work and wanted me to know, so that's why he opened it. Because he just couldn't knock, right? I told him that he should leave in a tone that was way calmer than I felt, and off he went. I called my dad, and he told me to never let him back in if I was on my own. The fourth time he came, my mom was home with me, and he spoke to her in an accent that I believe had to be Turkish, and you could barely understand a word. As my mom was home, I stayed with her as she talked to him. A door in our house leading to the back garden often gets badly stuck, but on that day, we thought my dad had locked it on his way out, as he sometimes does. The handyman somehow got it open, and we assumed that it must have been stuck after all. He made both my mom and me extremely uncomfortable as he stared at me the entire time. She then refused to answer the door and told me to never answer it again if it was the handyman. My dad would be dealing with all the interactions from then on. That was the last time I saw him for about 8 months, until 2 months ago. My dog was at the groomer, and as usual, I was home alone. I was in the kitchen starting dinner as it was about 6 p.m. and the sun was almost gone. There was a loud cry from the timber floors behind me that I ignored, as they often made noises when my dog was walking about. I can honestly tell you that it was the most horrific moment of realization for me when I remembered that my dog wasn't here and that there was somebody behind me. I tightened my grip on the massive knife that I'd been using to cut up some onion and whipped around. The handyman was there with the sickest smile on his face and had a hammer in his hand. I yelled at him to get out before I called the cops and held up the knife. I was shaking and he stepped forward. I went to run past him, but he grabbed me by the hair and, in a struggle, I sliced his face open and kneed him where it really hurts. And while he was in shock and or agony, I ran into my bedroom, which is right next to the door to the kitchen, and slammed the door shut, locked it, grabbed my phone, and forced the windows behind my bed open and jumped onto the rotting roof of the deck, which was attached to the outside wall directly below my window. The man was bashing on the door and made it in just as I jumped down onto the concrete and took off running across the street to a neighboring house. I called 000 crying and telling the operator what happened and that I needed the police. I banged on the neighbor's door begging to be let in, but nobody was home, so I ran to another house with the operator still on the phone asking for details. This neighbor was home, but before she could even open the door, I heard police sirens hurling down the street and ran to the officers the second they stepped out of the car. A report was made, my parents were called, and the media turned up. The knife was taken from me for DNA evidence, and the house was searched for him. Any evidence and how he had got in. I was taken to the hospital for a sprained ankle, whiplash from him yanking on my hair, and lots of cuts and bruises. The police found no evidence of how he had broken in, so it was assumed that he had acquired a key at some point, and neither his DNA nor fingerprints were on record. When the police contacted the real estate agent, they provided his name and phone number and claimed that he had a Swedish accent. The name was not true. No records were found, and the number was disconnected and untraceable. They had found him on a site where he had advertised himself as a cheap handyman who could fix any and all problems, but the ad has since been removed. The police only had his description to work with, and as such, he hasn't been found. It's terrifying to think about what he would have done to me if I hadn't fought back or if my window hadn't opened. I keep thinking about all the what ifs that could have changed my life so much or even ended it. I am an alcoholic and I have been sober for 9 years. That is, without a doubt, my proudest accomplishment. I started getting help during my sophomore year of high school. Looking back, I'm so grateful for the timing. If I had hit rock bottom later, things would have only gotten worse. My parents actually transferred me to a different school so I could start fresh and meet new people. By the time I turned 18, a few months before graduation, I had already been sober for over 2 years. That was around the time I started aging out of most of my teen recovery programs. A lot of the counselors I worked with only focused on youth cases, so I had to start finding adult support groups. I grew up in Los Angeles, but not the touristy part. My neighborhood had liquor stores every few blocks and corner shops with thick plexiglass windows. Alcoholism was really common and normalized. So once the teen programs ended for me, I started going to early morning AA meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They were held in a small church near my school. I did not have first period on those days, so it worked out perfectly. After the meetings, I would usually stay for a couple of extra minutes to write in my journal or just sit in quiet. One morning, this guy stayed after the meeting and asked me what I was writing. I told him I was journaling. He said he liked the idea and wanted to try it himself. After that, he started sitting next to me at every meeting. We would talk a bit afterward, and he seemed normal. He was about my age. He knew I was about to graduate and asked if I planned to keep coming to that group during the summer. I told him I was not sure yet. I had just gotten a job across town and was looking into meetings closer to where I would be working. I could tell he did not love that answer. Sometimes you can just see the disappointment on people's faces. I used to talk a lot in those meetings, and I did not just go to sit in silence. I brought energy into that room. I like to think that I helped people feel a little bit better. I think he felt that too, and I think that is why he did not want me to leave. People have told me I talk too much, so maybe I am just flattering myself and everybody else wanted me to be quiet, but I like to think I was making a difference. He asked again when I would be switching to a different group. I said I didn't know yet. I told him I planned to keep coming through the end of the school year. I do not remember if I ever told him the name of my school, but I always wore royal blue and gold, and he knew I went to school nearby, just around the corner from the church. It would have not been hard to figure it out. Then, in the last 2 weeks of my senior year, everything got wild. We had senior ditch day, late night hangouts, sleepovers, goodbye parties, etc. I missed the AA meetings at the church, and then I switched AA groups altogether. At graduation, everything was quiet, but that guy showed up. It was so off. He did not know me like that, and I never invited him. We weren't even close, but there he was, smiling at me from the back like it was completely normal. He came over afterward and said he brought a gift. It was a box of chocolates and a note about how much he would miss me. He said I should drop by the meeting sometime again. I uncomfortably said something like, "Thank you." I never went back. The whole situation was way too weird. I didn't want to see him again. Then he showed up at my new job. I was working the cosmetics counter at a big department store. The cosmetics department actually had its own cash register. First time he walked by, I noticed him. Then he came back the next day and the day after that. He never spoke or asked for help. He just wandered around near my station, looking over at me like it was no big deal. He didn't even try to be subtle. Eventually, I told one of my coworkers, the type of woman who doesn't play games. She walked right up to him and asked what he thought he was doing. She called him out in front of everyone. She said she knew exactly why he was there and that it was creepy and toxic. A few shoppers turned around to see what was going on. His face turned red and he walked away without saying anything. We told our manager afterward. The manager was glad we spoke up, but reminded us to let her know right away next time. There was no next time though, since he never came back. I have not seen him since, and hopefully he got bored and moved on. I do not really care to find out what he wanted. Right outside my apartment, smoking a cigarette, an unknown person snuck around the corner and sprayed me with pepper spray while I was looking at my phone. I could make out a tall, thin man with a backpack, walking away with his hands in his pockets before I lost the ability to keep my eyes open. There were no other people on the sidewalk in either direction. I didn't see his face and he didn't say anything, or even try to take anything from me or grab me. He didn't even stick around to watch me be all messed up, just walked away, like nothing happened. I'm very thankful that I was not able to feel for my keys and get back into my building, but then I started to realize that I could have permanent damage if I didn't get to a sink. I couldn't find the key to my studio. I was starting to not be able to breathe. I pounded on every door I could, until my neighbor, who I had never met before this moment, opened up for me. She let me bust into her bathroom and toss water everywhere. I felt so terrible for just commandeering her bathroom and bringing in that smell to her place, but I will be forever grateful to this lady for helping me and calling the police. They didn't find him, and now I'm wondering if this was random or if this dude was waiting for me. One of the creepiest events in my own experience that I can recall happened when I was about 9 years old. Late 1978 or early 1979 if I am not mistaken, which would have put me in 4th grade at the time. Just a bit of background information on my school here. It was a newer school for my district at the time, and I guess as an experiment and innovative architecture, the school had no square angles in the walls at all. Rather, for simplicity's sake, imagine a U shape where the opening of the U faces onto the parking lot, but where there were hexagons attached to the outer edge of the U. Each of those hexagons was called the pod, and each pod was divided into 6 classrooms, and one central area for that pod, from which a person could see into any of the 6 classrooms at one time. The playground was the entire area outside with the U-shaped collection of pods. First being blacktop, and then further out a grassy field. Critically, this meant that if you were very close to the pods, it was possible for somebody else, also close to the pods, to be within 20 feet of you and still be hidden around the bend of the wall. So on this day in 1978 or 1979, my school had open house / parent-teacher conferences. This was when parents were welcome to come to the school and talk with one another, and especially with their children's teachers, and to see how their child or children were performing in school. My mom never missed one of these, and this day was no exception. We went to the school and saw all of the teachers and kids and parents gathered in the cafeteria. After whatever general address the principal had to make, everybody went their separate ways to meet one-on-one. My mom had teachers to meet for 2 children, for me and my older brother, who was 1 year ahead of me. When we met my teacher, Miss H, my mom brought me and my brother into the classroom. She apparently had good things to say about me, and we were done quickly. But when we met my older brother's teacher, Mr. C, for some reason, my mom told me to go out on the playground and play. My brother remained in the classroom with my mom and his teacher. It was still light outside, so all seemed okay. However, by this time, an hour or more had probably passed since the principal's speech ended. Any parents who attended only for that, or who only wanted to meet a single teacher briefly, had done so by now and left. The playground area was devoid of people. Naive little boy that I was, I just walked around the pods like I was in my own house, and I stayed close to the outer wall of the pods for no real reason. All of a sudden, without hearing or seeing anything to prepare me for what was about to happen, I was pinched across the back of my neck very hard. The hand that held me seemed too strong for me to break away, and I didn't even have time to try before a voice whispered in my ear to stay still and not turn around. I nodded as best as I could. Then the voice told me to walk, and it led me around the pod to within sight of the parking lot where a few cars remained. The voice asked me if I saw the green car, the station wagon with wooden paneling on it. I did, and indicated so. The voice told me, "Walk to that car, get inside and wait there. Do not turn around. I will be right behind you, and if you turn around, I know you did it. Do you understand me?" All the while, the owner of the hand and of the harsh whisper squeezed my neck harder at intervals to add emphasis to certain points. The person then set me walking to that car. I think I know how the condemned dead man walking must feel. I was a naive boy, but not so naive as to believe in getting in that car was a good idea. On the other hand, I felt sure that turning around was death if the owner of that voice was still really there. I had gotten halfway to the car when I wound up freezing, unsure what to do. I just stood there crying, which was already an improvement over the extremity of fear that preceded it. I don't know if I stood there seconds or minutes, but eventually I turned around. Nobody was there. I figured they were back around the pod, peeking and waiting. But my mom was in that direction also. So I swung way out into the playground area and walked carefully back around. Somewhere near where I was originally pinched were two boys a year ahead of me, my older brother's age, playing marbles. Roger and another boy whose name I never knew. I avoided them, feeling sure they, Roger particularly, were probably the ones who had pinched me, but I'm sure at some point they noticed me passing them at a distance. They did not react at all. In fact, my brother talked about Roger much later by chance in terms that caused me to believe he was a nice guy. Probably as importantly, later reflection led me to consider the whispered voice in the powerful hand to most likely have belonged to an adult male, not to a fellow child. But why did that fool want me in Mr. C's car? Mr. C was in a conference with my mom, so it was not his doing. My only other guess was my third grade teacher, Mr. S, who had once grabbed me violently when I got up from my chair in class without permission while he was in a bad mood. That dude was eventually arrested in 1980 on suspicion of having molested 4 people earlier the same year. A year after my traumatic experience on the playground. I'll never know for sure, but I will always wonder who it was. Last night, my friends, my crush, and I agreed to meet at my favorite bar after work. I was a bit early since I got to leave work 30 minutes early, so I went inside and ordered a beer for myself. There was a huge muscular guy with a long-ass ponytail sitting at the bar, and the seat next to him was empty. He offered me to sit down, so I did. We had some small talk, and he seemed nice enough. Just asked me why I'm all alone, and he kept talking about how I looked so uneasy and nervous and that I should relax. It was pretty weird, but he had an almost empty bottle of vodka in front of him, so I really didn't think anything of it. My friends finally arrived just as I finished my first beer, and we went to sit at a table. I had 3 more bottles of beer, and we were having a good time. Whenever I went to the toilet, that guy from the bar was there asking me if I was okay. That was pretty strange, but at the time, I just felt a little bit tipsy, and everything was alright. At some point, I started to feel sick, so I went outside to have a cigarette and get some cold air. The guy followed me outside and asked if I was alright. I was starting to get weirded out at that point. The bar was super full, but he really seemed to watch me all night. I went back inside, ordered a glass of water, and told my friends that I wasn't feeling well and would be going home. They all offered to bring me home, which I am so darn grateful for looking back. Took a sip of water, and then it all just hit me. I ran outside and threw up. I could barely stand up all of a sudden, so I sat down on a staircase and kept throwing up. My friends found me a few minutes later and kept arguing about whether they should take me to a taxi or carry me home. Then the guy from the bar showed up. He kept saying that he just lives down the street and that I could sleep on his couch. My coworker, who was basically like an older brother to me, got really mad and told the guy to screw off. They forced me to stand up, which was almost impossible at that point, and somehow dragged me to my friend's place, where I went to sleep hugging a bucket and feeling like I was going to die any second. This morning I wasn't able to stand up for hours. When I did, it resulted in instant vomiting. It was 1 p.m. when I finally managed to go to the train station, get something to eat and drink, and head home. I'm still shaking and sweating, and everything looks blurry. So, weird guy from the bar, I hope we never meet again, and hope he won't be doing this to other girls. It happened in my bedroom at the age of 10. I always had trouble sleeping and spent most nights tossing and turning. I was a horror film fanatic as a child, and being scared was something I didn't have much experience with. I was not afraid of the dark, nor was I easily swayed by strange sounds or odd encounters. I did, however, know when to haul ass out of a situation or to find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which will come to be of some sort of significance later in the story. I should also mention that my family home was in a heavily wooded area, in what some may refer to as the middle of nowhere. One night at around 1 a.m., I awoke to a sound coming from underneath my bed. It sounded like one of my cats was scratching with one of their feet, or doing something to cause a thumping beneath me. I had heard this same sound many times before, and its source had always been one of my fuzzy friends, so this time I didn't look. I closed my eyes and tried to resume my slumber. I turned over onto my left side, which left me facing the wall against which my bed was pressed up. I heard the sound again, and thinking that my kitty was directly beneath me, I said goodnight. I was able to fall asleep once again. The next time I awoke, it was to a surreal and shocking scene. The sheet and comforter of my bed were no longer covering me. I saw a man standing over my bed poking me with his finger, and the way in which he did was so truly horrifying. It was not the way that a child would poke a friend in jest. It was as if he were touching another human being for the first time. exploring the sensation of the tip of his index finger jabbing at flesh. What I saw was so unbelievable, so impossibly strange that I believed I was dreaming. I tried desperately to awake from my nightmare to no avail. The poking continued. Poked at my chest, my belly, my legs, and my arms. Paralyzed and scared shitless, I yelled, "Wake up." And with this, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes, as if he were trying to lead me to believe that he was asleep or dead. I have no idea. It was at this time I realized I could not have been dreaming. I somehow found the ability to move, and I jumped from the top of my bed, over the man lying on the floor next to me, and ran towards my parents' room. When I got to their bedroom door, something came over me. I told myself that this was all impossible, that there was no way that a person could have entered our home without breaking in, as we had always kept every door and window locked at night. I had seen so many strange things in my home while either falling asleep or waking up. By the third or fourth time after speaking to my mom or dad about it, I knew that it was my mind playing tricks on me. Plush toys do not have the ability to turn and whisper into each other's ears. Do not ask why, dear reader, as I have no explanation for you, but I turned away from my parents' bedroom door and decided to hastily check the house for a break-in. What I found was that nothing was out of the ordinary. No broken windows or locks. No busted doors, nothing. I assured myself that I had to have been dreaming or hallucinating and blamed my obsession with horror for this. I made my way down the long, dark, and narrow hallway to my bedroom. I peeked inside and saw nobody. I turned on the light and got down on the floor just outside the doorway and even looked under the bed. Nothing still. I proceeded to check both of my windows for signs of a break-in, which were not present. Both windows were closed and even locked. I knew it. I was definitely seeing things. I crawled back into bed and decided to watch some TV in order to calm myself down and distract from thoughts of the scary as heck dream or hallucination I just had. I turned on the TV, flipped to a channel with a seemingly boring program. This always helped me become sleepy, and put the remote control on my bedside table. I was lying on my right side, facing away from the wall that I mentioned previously. As I laid there, my eyes began to adjust to the dark room with the faint light from the TV screen. Just beyond the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink into the pit of my stomach. Inside my closet, with one of the doors now slightly closed, I saw the man standing perfectly still facing the wall, hiding, waiting for me to fall asleep, I imagine. I couldn't breathe and couldn't move. I sat and stared at the man in my closet for what seemed like minutes, but was only a few seconds probably. I quietly got out of bed, hoping that the man wouldn't notice and that my dad could catch him hiding in the closet. I once again made my way to my parents' bedroom door, still remaining as quiet as I possibly could, and went inside. I shook my dad and my mom at the same time, and when they awoke, I said, "Shh, don't make any sound. There's somebody in my closet." My parents both jumped up and said, "What?" I repeated myself and asked them to please call 911. My mom immediately picked up the phone. Neither of my parents doubted my claim, as I had always been very honest and forthright. They both knew there was no way that I was making this up or that I was mistaken. I'm sure that the look I must have had on my face made it clear that this was really happening too. My dad told my mom and me that he was going to look and urged us to stay in their bedroom and lock the door, so we did. At this point, I was very scared. I didn't know what the man was capable of, or whether he had a weapon, or if my dad was safe. I just stood in the room with my mom and cried. After what felt like hours, my dad knocked on the door and told me it was him and that it was okay to open the door. My mom unlocked the door and let my dad inside. I said something to the effect of, "Did you get him?" And my dad looked at me with the most unsettling and confused look imaginable. He said, "There's nobody there." I assured him that there was indeed a man in my room and that he had been poking me. My dad said that he had just checked every inch of the house and found nobody. He had also checked the doors and windows just as I had done. Then it hit me. He must have had a key. As soon as I said this, my parents looked at each other in absolute terror. Our nearest neighbor, a trusted and beloved friend who we considered family even, was in possession of a key to our house, as she had regularly babysat me since I was a toddler. She was the only person outside of my immediate family with a key to our home. Soon after this revelation, the police arrived, took statements, and checked around our property and left. None of us got any sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to my neighbor's house and asked if she knew where her key to our house was. She said yes, and when she went to show him, she saw that it was missing. Her home had no signs of a break-in, and she had always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents had all of the locks on our doors changed and opted to never again give a key to anybody, except in the wake of an emergency. I never discovered the identity of the man that lurked in my bedroom that night. The event left me traumatized, and it took a very long time for me to accept what had happened and move on. My sleeping trouble turned into full-on insomnia, and for about a decade, I was unable to sleep without a light on. It has been 20 years since that night, and apart from my parents, I have never told a soul about it until now. I've actually found writing this to be very cathartic, and I'm glad that I stumbled across Let's Not Meet. My heart goes out to anyone who has suffered a trauma in their lives, and I hope that you are able to find peace within yourselves. Hi, I'm a 24-year-old lad living in the UK. I work as a pharmacist at a hospital and I usually do night shifts. My workplace is just a few lots away from home, so I just walk every night. A few months ago, while I was on my way to work at around midnight, a car stopped in front of me and rolled down its window. The guy inside was wearing a scrub suit, so I'm assuming he is a nurse. Has dark hair, is chubby, and is probably around my age. "Hey, where are you heading? Let me drive you to work." I politely declined. The guy looked harmless, and I guess being polite wouldn't hurt. He looked pretty normal, but there's something in his eyes that unsettles me. He didn't go after that and kept on insisting on driving me to work. That's when I snapped and told him that I was waiting for my boyfriend, which isn't true, because my boyfriend is in the US, miles away from me. He seemed to believe in it and just drove away. Days have passed since I got a chat request. I tried to check the profile and saw that it was the creepy lad offering to ride me to work. How did he get my name? I have no idea. I didn't pay his chat any attention and just went on with my pretty busy life. 2 days after that, I got another message from him saying, "You were smiling earlier. You look cute." After reading that message, it felt like I had been splashed with an ice-cold bucket of water. Was he at the hospital? I didn't want to know. I told him to stay away from me and F off. Days have passed and I had almost forgotten about this guy when I saw him standing in the hallway looking at me while I was exiting the room doing rounds. He tried to approach, but I beelined my way to the other hallway and went back to the pharmacy. That's when I started freaking out and told my boyfriend. He advised me to just drive to work instead of walking, and I did right after that night. I also blocked him to avoid any unwanted future creepy messages. So far, I haven't seen him in months, and I just want to keep it that way. I suffer from schizophrenia. The other night, I had an extreme episode of psychosis. I don't remember much about what happened. I was wearing sweatpants and high heels and wandering around my apartment complex. I decided to go home. The main door in my apartment complex requires a keycard, like a hotel, but my roommates always leave the back door open. So I walked into what I thought was my apartment and made myself comfy on the couch. I tried to go into my room, but it was locked, which confused me because I never lock my door. The people who lived there thought I was a friend of one of the other roommates, so it took them a minute to register what happened. When they did, they freaked out, understandably, and called the cops. The cop thought I was drinking or on drugs, but I showed him my medical emergency card that explains I have schizophrenia. After he read the card, I was totally out of trouble, and he just wanted to make sure I got home safely. I don't even remember the interactions I had with the people who lived there, as I wasn't super lucid until the officer came. So yeah, now these people have a story about how a random schizophrenic woman in sweats and high heels just came into their house and made herself at home. This all happened at night. Oops, sorry. This happened some hours ago. To give you a bit of context, I'm a male in my early 20s and I live in an apartment on the second floor. I come back home from a New Year's Eve party around 6 a.m. I undress myself, text a couple of people, and then go to bed. All of this in a span of 10 to 15 minutes. Then basically as soon as I get into bed, I hear my doorbell ring. Not my actual door, but the gate to the apartment complex. Initially I say, screw it. It must be a drunk person or somebody pulling a prank and being a jerk. But then this person keeps ringing very insistently, so I go on my boxers to answer the phone that is wired to the gate. I don't know if that makes sense. I answer the phone and I hear a foreign sounding guy that is trying to tell me something about a friend and keys and to let him in the complex. I thought about it for a second and then I tell him, I don't know you, so I'm not going to open the gate. I hang up and go to bed again. They keep ringing very insistently, so I get up again and go answer the phone. This time a bit angry, and I am greeted by a girl speaking perfect English. I live in Italy, and telling me in a very clear way that she is staying on the 5th floor and her friend has the keys, that she is a woman alone in the street, and to come check it at the door if I don't believe her. She sounded very convincing, to be honest. Mind you, in this moment I'm drunk, high and very tired, trying to weigh my options. What if she really is a girl alone in the street at 6 a.m. in the cold and with all of the drunk people going around? What if she isn't though? Fortunately, even in my intoxicated state, I have the idea to go out on the balcony over the gate and check out who is in the street. I throw on my parka because it's pretty cold and in my boxers. I go out on the balcony to have an incredibly screwed you moment. There were 4 seedy looking people, 2 males and 2 females, if I saw correctly, right in front of the gate, talking quietly between themselves, and I yelled at them. I probably shouldn't have done it. Hey, you wanted to come in? And immediately went inside to call the police and grab a knife. Yeah. The real scary thing is that my gate is not see-through, so if I went down, I wouldn't have seen outside, and as soon as I opened the door, I would have been overpowered by them and probably forced to let them in my apartment. The story pretty much ends here. These people kept ringing the bell aggressively for another 15 minutes while I took off the lights and went around my house like a drunken Rambo with a knife in my hand, checking periodically all the windows. I have windows on the internal courtyard and windows on the street, which they easily could have climbed, or so I thought. And then it all ended. I don't even know if the police saw anyone or came at all because I never heard from them, and I just went to bed after a solid hour of this. This happened a few months ago in the McDonald's at Copenhagen Station. I am not Danish. I am only visiting the country for one day, and since I wanted to travel cheap, I decided to take the cheapest bus there, which just so happened to be the one arriving at 11 p.m. the day before. I thought I could save even more money by not renting a bed somewhere and instead spending the night awake or half asleep at the station, doing my business the next day and sleeping long and well on the bus back home. So this McDonald's is open 24/7. I pretty early discovered that the station was too cold for me to get some shut-eye, so I went inside, bought a coffee, and sat down at an empty table. Plenty of lighting and semi-drunk people to keep me awake, I thought. I should add I'm 23 and female. After some while of sitting in my spot, a strange guy walked over and placed a full cup of soda on my table. He said in Danish something I believe meant, "I ate my food already, I didn't drink any. You should have it instead." I'm Swedish, and although some Swedes understand Danish perfectly well, I have some difficulties doing so this is just a guess. Anyways, I didn't really pay much attention to the cup after it was put on my table. Just wrote it off as a random drunk trying to flirt, but I noticed that in front of me, a table away sat another guy, and he was watching me closely, because we did lock eyes the times I looked up to peek at him. This creeped me out. I really didn't like being watched like this, and he just sat there for nearly an hour, even though he had no food in front of him. In the end, this dude stood up and walked over to me, and I cursed internally, thinking I'd have to defend myself and tell him to leave. But he turned, and there stood the guy that had left the soda cup on my table. He told the soda guy to leave after pushing the soda cup back into his arms and said that he didn't want to see him anywhere near this place again. Then he turned to me and explained in English that soda guy had walked by my table several times, glancing at me in the cup and probably waiting for me to drink it. He said he'd finished his meal a while ago, and he just stayed to watch over me, but had to leave and reminded me to be careful. I hadn't even noticed soda guy supposedly pacing by. I was too fixated on this other dude, who just happened to be the good guy watching over me. Who knows what was in that soda, and what would have happened if I had gotten really thirsty and drank some of it. Last year, after a blissful first year of living in a new apartment all on my own for the first time, a man moved in next door that I will never forget. The layout of the apartment is crucial to understanding this incident, and the most important part is that my balcony and his balcony are only partially separated by a wall. There is a solid 2-foot gap in which you can easily walk from one to the other. For context, I previously had a very lovely woman living next door for the entire first year I lived there, who never crossed this balcony threshold without being explicitly invited. I only throw this in there so you can understand I wasn't previously concerned about someone infiltrating my space. The first time I met this neighbor, he was unloading groceries from his massive truck into the assigned parking spot next to mine. As I was driving up, he and a girl I assumed to be his girlfriend were unloading boxes from Costco. I noticed them speaking, and as soon as I was out of the car, they went silent. I nodded to them and proceeded to the elevator, and the guy ran up behind me, threw some boxes down, and begged me to wait. No problem, I'm a good neighbor. While in the elevator, the girlfriend refused to make eye contact or speak to me. A little bit weird, but I just thought she was shy. But he quickly introduced himself and was extremely chatty. In the 45-second it takes to get to the floor, where our apartments were, he asked how I liked the place, where I was from, and where I worked. Looking back, his enthusiasm was a little strange, but I chalked it up to him being excited to be in a new place. For the sake of the rest of the story, let's call him Sam. Sam was maybe 33, 6 feet tall, with a slim, muscular build. and had his hair buzzed extremely short as if to mask his balding. Pretty average looking by all accounts. The first few weeks we run into each other often, and he always makes small talk and always refers to me as Miss. I assume it's because he forgot my name but wanted to be polite. I almost never see his girlfriend after the first night, but occasionally I can hear him talking to a lady in his apartment as the walls are reasonably thin. One night about 3 months after Sam moved in, my boyfriend was spending the night and we were watching movies on the couch. It was maybe 11:30 p.m. The back of my couch is against the wall I share with Sam and we hear some banging noises. My first thought is that he and his girlfriend must be getting it on. My boyfriend and I laugh and turn the volume up a bit and drown them out. Then, in addition to the banging, the neighbors begin screaming. We can hear objects being thrown and glass shattering. The words are muffled, but there is distinctively anger and crying going on. My boyfriend, gem that he is, steps onto the semi-shared balcony and, in his loudest voice, yells over, without crossing onto Sam's balcony, "Everything okay in there?" The girl opens the sliding glass door on Sam's side a minute or two later and says, "Sorry about that." So we leave it alone. I'm obviously concerned, but we have no idea what actually happened and decide to go to bed. Big mistake, I know. I wake up around 3 a.m. to more screaming, but my boyfriend refuses to wake up, and I'm not about to take my 5-foot self to break up whatever is going on at 3 a.m. I considered calling the police, but was so drowsy I convinced myself I dreamed it. I deeply regret that decision. The next morning I woke up to some terrible personal news. An entirely unrelated death of a friend and pretty much put the events of that night on the back burner. I didn't forget, but it also wasn't on my mind. Fast forward about 2 weeks, it's a warm day, and I'm outside reading a book in a robe. Sports bra and shorts. I'm in a chair that faces away from Sam's apartment so I can't see his side from where I am. I'm deep in my book when suddenly I get tapped on the shoulder. Sam is standing behind me and asks if we can talk for a second. This man has already crossed an albeit invisible line by coming on my side of the balcony, but I also can't get to my door without physically moving him aside, so I ask him what's going on. He told me it was his birthday and asked if I knew where to get weed because I seemed like a girl who knows how to have a good time. As we live in a state where weed is legal, I told him that I'm sure Google would provide the best dispensary in the area, but I personally didn't have any. He proceeds to tell me how drunk he got last night, and at this point I'm itching for an exit. As I start to move, as if to signal that I'm done talking, he reaches out for my shoulder and tells me that he hit and scratched my car last night because he was driving very, very wasted. Remember his massive truck? He says all of this with a smile on his face, almost laughing. I'm surprised, but mostly want to get away from him because my creep senses are starting to tingle and I don't want to blow up at him for hitting my car. He says he'll send me his insurance info if I give him my number. And thankfully, I knew that would be a bad call. I made a bad previous joke about knowing where he lived and said if the damage was bad enough, I would knock on his door to get his insurance. He counters by saying he will leave a note with his info on my door. He retreats from my balcony while also saying he preferred to just pay me cash and not involve insurance. I give it an hour or so, then I head down to assess the damage. I did this because I didn't want to walk down at the same time as him or risk having him follow me. Sure enough, there are 2 long new scratches on the driver's side door. They are not deep, just kind of superficial or worthy of a call to insurance immediately. I really just didn't want to get involved with him in any way, so I decided I would deal with the scratches, but this little event has kind of shaken me. At this point, I knew something was off with him. Nothing unusual happens as far as I'm aware this night. The next day is a Saturday, and as I had to work the next day, I am home alone, watching some action-y movie, and it's around 11 p.m. I'm on the sofa with my cat curled up on me, and the movie is relatively loud, so it takes me a little while to register this banging noise coming from the hallway of my apartment building. I honestly only noticed because my cat had woken up and got all puffed up and freaked out. I turned down the volume of the film, and suddenly the banging is getting louder and louder. And just as I stand up, I hear the 5 words nobody wants to hear coming from their door. "Open up. It's the police." My stomach dropped to the floor. I had lied to Sam the day before. I totally had weed, and I had smoked a joint outside on my balcony, the farthest part away from Sam's, maybe 20 minutes before. I'm totally panicked and trying to control my breathing, so I don't immediately come off as suspicious before I answer the door. I remember checking the peephole to see a close-up of a cop's face and then opening the door, coming face to face with 6 officers, all with guns drawn. I am about 0.5 seconds away from completely peeing my pants in fear, still convinced I'm somehow in trouble for smoking a joint. The officer who seems to be in charge can instantly sense the level of my panic, and he says, "Ma'am, you're not in trouble. We need to speak with you about your neighbor. Can we come in?" At this point I'm reeling, and my whole being is tense. I let the cops in, but my heart hasn't moved from my throat. The lead policeman asks me about any interactions with Sam. I tell them I barely know him, that he just lives next to me and only moved in a few months ago. I asked why they needed to be in my apartment. I'm scared, but also I don't always trust cops yet. I asked why they needed to be in my apartment. I'm scared, but also I don't always trust cops, and I have the right to know why 6 of them practically waved their guns in my face. He proceeds to tell me that Sam is a bad guy. He apparently beat his girlfriend so badly the night prior that she was now in the ICU for her injuries. The cops also told me Sam's girlfriend said she believed he had a gun and that he was currently using something to barricade himself in the apartment next to mine. The lead officer says he had spoken to my building manager and knew my place had access to his balcony, and they needed to use it to arrest him. I'm probably visibly shaking at this point as fear courses through me. Next, they asked me to go into my bedroom and lock the doors / turn the lights off. The next 30 to 45 minutes were horrible. In my panic, I had left my cell phone on my kitchen counter and had to sit in my room just listening to the commotion. No shots were ever fired, but there was a lot of yelling and what sounded like things being thrown. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime, the main officer knocked on my door and told me that Sam had been arrested and thanked me for letting them use my apartment. They asked me questions for maybe 15 minutes and left. I wish this was where the story ended, but there is a bit more. In the days following Sam's arrest, I became even more panicked about him coming back to the apartment building, worried about retaliation. I hadn't said anything to the police to technically incriminate him. They had proof of nothing except his word that he was the one who scratched my car, but I did tell them about the night my boyfriend and I heard them fight. About 5 days later, Sam reappeared at the building as I was coming home from work one evening. He tried to approach me, but the elevator shut just as he was running to catch it. My whole body got tense, like the feeling when you come this close to getting in a car accident, but narrowly avoided it. I stayed off my balcony entirely from this point and always kept the curtains closed. We didn't speak or really see each other at all for another few weeks, and then had our final interaction. Sam stopped me in the parking lot one night, running after me as I was about to get on the elevator. He begged me to tell him why I let the cops in that night. I told him the honest truth, that I was stoned, didn't know what to do, and had a bad history with cops. This is all true, and again, I was concerned about him trying to retaliate. He then got pretty upset and trying to repeat the question, obviously wanting a different answer. When I couldn't give him one, he then offered me $3,000 to testify as a character witness on his behalf, because I knew him and knew how he really treated women, he said. I was speechless and very freaked out. He told me his hearing was the next Thursday morning and asked if I could show up. I was like a deer frozen in headlights for a moment, and then somehow got the heck out of there after mumbling a string of words that were most likely incoherent. The Wednesday night before his trial, I came from work and my cat was acting kind of weird, like something had just spooked her and her tail was puffed out. Kind of shook it off, but I noticed through the curtains there was something taped to the outside of my sliding glass door. Apparently, Sam had left a post-it with his phone number and name underneath. I'm counting on you. Needless to say, I never showed up. I took a photo of the post-it, grabbed my cat, locked all of my doors, and stayed at my mom's house for about 5 days after that happened. I did phone the police to let them know that he had been on my balcony again, but they never followed up with anything. Eventually, my boyfriend came and we went back to my place together. Everything was as it should have been. I never saw Sam again, but a few weeks later, a lady I'd never seen before was cleaning out his apartment. Maybe a month after that, new people moved in, and things have been normal since. I tried calling the police and the county jail to see if he was in lockup again, but nobody was able to release information to me. I'm hoping that means he's there, if he did what the police said he did. So to Sam, I'll say, I'm not really sure what happened, but my biggest regret is not calling the police when I felt like I should have in my gut. Let's never meet again. Update. A comment made me realize I left out something really important. Before the new people moved in, I ran to my building manager and had a chat with him about Sam, in an attempt to discover if Sam had been evicted or if he went to jail. The manager disclosed the girlfriend did pull through. Never knew her name, so I couldn't follow up with trying to see if she was okay with local hospitals. The manager did tell me that Sam was made an exception to break his lease, but he couldn't confirm whether or not he was in jail. Also, per a commenter, I looked up my county's inmate list and can't find his name, but I'm not sure if the name he gave me was even his legal name or just what he went by. I don't have much else to go off of, sadly. So, about 4 years ago, I was living with an ex-boyfriend. We'll call him Useless Jerk, and his aunt, Pill Popper Pam, and her boyfriend, Loser Len. I woke up in the middle of the night and had to pee. Useless Jerk was asleep in bed when I got up. I walked across the house and Pill Pop and Pam's door was open. She and loser Len were both passed out. I made my way sleepily to the bathroom and saw the light was on. Since I knew everybody was asleep, I assumed Pam left the light on and opened the door. I was wrong. I saw multiple things in a few seconds. The first thing I remember is that it smelled like horrible shit and that someone had just taken a shower based off the steam. Secondly, there were clothes folded up into squares and organized on the ground. There was a man on the toilet. I, having manners and very much still half asleep, jumped and apologized and closed the door. I panicked and went to my room and tried to wake the useless jerk up, but he was, of course, useless. I texted Pam and said, "Hey, there is a man in the bathroom." She texted back, "I know, it's okay, he's a friend of mine." This calmed me down a little bit, and I messaged back something like, "Okay, thanks, just checking." And she said, "No problem, go back to sleep." And I did. The next day, I bring it up when everybody is around. Pam says she never texted me, that she was high on pills and passed out cold, and she would never allow a friend to just come in like that, and that it sounded like it was the homeless man who walked our street constantly. He had used her phone. Edit. I will add her phone was unplugged and sitting on the ground about 2 feet inside her bedroom door next to her bed. When we talked about if he could have texted from it, she said she didn't have the passcode on her phone. In 2010, I was 12 years old. My younger brother played baseball. I would attend the summer tournaments to play with friends on the nearby playground or in the woods. My mom worked in the concession stand and my dad was a coach. One day during tournament games, I wandered into the woods farther than I had before. This wasn't a very big forest. It was in the middle of a suburb. Although as a kid it seemed massive. I found a treehouse. I was too scared to explore it alone, so I went back later with friends. We climbed inside the treehouse. It was everything a kid could have wanted. After a while we got bored and left, but as we were leaving, I felt like we were being watched. We started walking away from the treehouse and 2 men bursted from the bushes. We were a small trio of 12-year-olds. We started running and screaming. I tried to not look back, but when I did, I saw something in their hands. I just kept running. My friend and I who wore flip-flops tripped and fell. We all stopped running and looked back. We were so close to the field, but still hidden by the vegetation and tall grass. We were unseen by all the adults seated on the bleachers. They caught up to us so fast. We were screaming and crying. They had hatchets, but all they said was, "We just really didn't want you to go into our deer blind." They looked sheepish and nervous, realizing how close people were nearby. They took off, and we all heard our dad sobbing. They ran into the woods and with baseball bats, combing the forest. Not finding anything, they accused us of lying. Now that I'm an adult, I realized that was not a deer blind. It was a treehouse deliberately pulled into the middle of the woods so that children would go inside. I ask myself a lot, what could have happened to me if I had the courage to go into that treehouse alone? I didn't mention this in the story, but I think it's important. We were a group of very small, vulnerable girls. Danger is everywhere for young girls. To start this off, I'd like to give a bit of context. This happened 4 years ago. I'm a girl, and at the time this happened, I was 12 going on 13 in just a month or two. The friend I mentioned in this story was 14 at the time. The friend, Sally, who I was staying with that night, 14 female, was quite a bit older than me. At least at the time. The 2-year age gap was quite big. At 12 or 13 years old, I was about to start my second year of middle school, whereas Sally should have been about to begin her sophomore year of high school. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids, and I think that was what drew me to her at first. We became friends fast, and before we knew it, we were spending every single weekend together. Seriously, every single weekend. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. I've always been a picky eater, so when her family had dinner, I didn't eat with them. I just snacked on the Pop-Tart that I stowed away in my backpack in case they ordered something that I wouldn't eat. Something to note is that her family was pretty religious. I wouldn't go as far as to say they were fanatics, but they didn't allow their kids to watch horror movies or anything that was rated PG-13 or older. It didn't stem from the desire to protect them from something inappropriate. Sally's mother had an irrational fear that scary movies had satanic messages. We asked to watch The Purge, and her mom obviously said no. After some negotiating, she agreed to let us watch Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I went to hang out in her room. She put on some music, and being the age we were, we gave each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than just 12 and 14. This part of the night is when things started to seem off to me. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my best friend at the time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down sometimes. She even had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. Sally showed me some texts between her and the man she was talking to. I can't give you an exact recount of them, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him, and just the usual things you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall and blonde with soulful blue eyes. Once I saw the text, I asked if she had a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me, after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. This man was at least 40 and looked like he had lived in his mother's basement. Then we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation, and when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're so pretty. Why don't you come and meet me?" he said. Sally said that she couldn't because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that sparked his interest, and then he proceeded to try and ask us both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Thus began her plan for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet him in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Sally that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. I even had a kitchen knife stuffed in my bra in case something were to happen and I needed to defend myself. The route that we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, the only car parked nearby was a black beat-up 2000 Toyota Corolla. The car was still running when we got there, and from what we could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out of the front passenger seat and left the door open behind him before approaching us. I turned my flash on so I could see, and he was obviously on something. I can't tell you what kind of drug it was for the life of me, but his eyes were so wide, they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He was jittery and kept twitching. I became very conscious of how big he was, maybe 6'2", around 280 pounds. For reference, my friend and I did not look our ages, even without makeup. I'm about 5'2". My friend was pretty tall, probably around 5'6" or 5'7". We were both significantly smaller than him. The man reached out for us and caught my friend by the arm. I went to get my knife as quickly as I could, and that's when I saw his friends getting out of the car. He invited us back to his car and offered us booze and drugs. But after seeing my knife and that I was ready to call the police, he released my friend. I took Sally's arm and ran faster than I ever had in my entire life. We took the long way home to avoid them finding out where she lived in case they were following us. Once we got there, her family was still sound asleep. We locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and blocked him on everything. There wouldn't be any sleeping that night. We were constantly peeking out the window, and to our dismay, that same Toyota was circling around her apartment building. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I never mentioned any of this to my parents, out of fear of getting grounded or in trouble. I'm 16 now and they still have no clue. I still get nervous when I see a car similar to the one from that night. As for Sally, her parents never found out either. We agreed to never speak about it again. Thankfully, she moved into a new house just a few weeks after that happened. Safe to say, Sally and I haven't spoken about 3 years. She was mad at me for ruining her night, she said, and our friendship didn't last long after that. We had a pretty bad falling out, but looking back on it, this was definitely for the better. So to Sally, thank you for teaching me a very valuable lesson and making me realize that some people are best just left alone. And to the man and his friends who tried to prey upon 2 young girls, let's not ever meet again. This is not my story, but instead my sister's, who will be using my account to share it with all of you. When I was in high school, I was good friends with a girl called Emma. Emma was kind of quiet and shy, but always there if you needed her. When I finished high school, I lost touch with Emma, as what happens to a lot of friendships after school. 2 years later, in college, I started dating a guy called Ben, and Ben's friend Gary was Emma's boyfriend. After discovering that we all knew each other, we started to hang out again. One of the nights we planned to all hang out in Gary's house, have a few drinks, and play a few games. Ben and I showed up at about 8 p.m. to Gary's house, and Gary said Emma should be over soon. That was fine. We opened our beers and started drinking. It was nearly 9 p.m. and Emma still wasn't here, so we decided to ring her. Emma answered and apologized for being late. She said she was just finishing getting ready and she should be there soon. At 9:30 p.m., there was still no sign of Emma, so we called again. This time her younger brother picked up the phone. Her brother was 15 years old at the time and had told us that Emma was not feeling well and was in the bathroom. Gary was worried and asked if we could head over and check on her, but her brother was adamant that he was looking after Emma and she was alright and to enjoy our night. We didn't go home. Instead, we just kept drinking and hanging out because all we thought was Emma just had the simple flu. Just after 10 p.m., we decided to call one last time and check on Emma. Again, her brother answered and calmly told us that Emma had gone to bed and she would call in the morning. We left it at that, believing she was safe at home in bed and didn't want to annoy her brother by non-stop calling. That night, Emma's mom returned home at 12 a.m. to find Emma dead on the kitchen floor. Emma had been bludgeoned to death by her younger brother a couple of hours earlier. We later found out when Emma was leaving to come to us, she and her brother got into a fight about something ridiculous and he beat her with a baseball bat and then stabbed her over 51 times. Since her brother was a minor, he was not going to be sent to prison. Instead, her brother pleaded insanity and was sent to an institution. A lot of this information was not leaked as the accused was a minor. I do know that the parents stuck by him and he was released after 4 years.